reality, they stroke him and butter him up by saying, and then, when the king's edict is proclaimed, thou will teach Vashti a lesson, and then, throughout his whole vast and magnificent realm, O mighty king, all of the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the very greatest. Yeah, that'll happen. Now, right? Now, part of what's going on here is that the writer is showing us what flatterers these advisors are. You see, Xerxes' advisors all know that his shadow mission is ego, appearance, and pleasure, so they just make everything about him. And of course, the king has surrounded himself with people who just reinforce his shadow mission. Now, there's an important lesson for us to learn right here. One of the signs that our shadow mission is taking over is when the perception of reality is more important than reality itself. You might need to chew on that a little bit. You see, when you and the people that you've gathered around you are more interested in your slant on the truth than truth itself, when you're more interested in placating or pleasing or pointing the finger rather than facing truth or reality, that's a sign that our shadow mission is taking over. And hear me, church, the only way to fight this is to have a friend or friends who will speak the truth to you, no matter how painful that truth may be. The greatest friends in the world are those who are truth tellers. All of us need people who will be engaged enough in our life to speak truth into our life. You see, we have a choice in the matter. We can either choose compliant friends, friends who just go along with anything and everything we say and do, whether it's right or wrong. Or we can choose real friends, friends who are engaged enough in our life to speak the truth to us. Friends who will challenge the shadow mission of our life. And friends who will keep us focused on the real mission of our life. Well, we all know what kind of friends Xerxes has, don't we? He has friends who reinforce his shadow mission. And so Xerxes decides to get a new queen. And guess who he has advise him? He has his servants advise him, and they were like his bodyguards. But what's so crazy about this is that these bodyguards were young men. Young men. Guys with lots of testosterone. So he asked these guys to give him an idea of what to look for in a new queen. Anybody want to guess what their number one criteria is going to be? They suggest that he hold a Miss Needs and a Persian beauty contest where every province would contribute one finalist to the royal harem. And in the end, the girl who pleases the king would become the ultimate trophy wife. Now, I know that it's hard for us to believe in our day that there was once a culture so superficial that middle-aged men would try to impress other people by showing they had so much wealth and power that they could attract a wife of youth and beauty. It's hard for us to believe that the human race ever descended to such depths, but once there was such a day. And of course, one of the contestants is a young Jewish girl named Esther. She was an orphan. She had been adopted and raised by her cousin Mordecai. And we're told in the Bible that she was fair and beautiful. And she makes it through the prelims and is one of the finalists selected to go to the king. And so she begins her preparation. Now, some of you young girls here, you probably spend hours getting ready for your dates. But that is nothing compared to Esther. Before Esther's first date with the king, we're told that she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatment. So there was a lot of pressure put on this first date, because if someone is not attracted to you after 12 months of preparation, it's probably just not going to happen. And so this young, obscure, orphan Jewish girl goes in, and there's all this pressure from all over the country. And Esther wins, and she pleases the king. And Esther is made the queen, and her apparent mission, what anybody around her would have understood, Her apparent mission was to be eye candy for the most powerful man on earth. And the king throws another party, and Esther lives happily ever after, right? Not so much. There's another character in this story. His name is Haman, and he is Xerxes' chief of staff, and he too has a shadow mission. He is mortally offended because there is one man who will just not bow down and give him worship. And that one man is named Mordecai, Esther's guardian. And Haman is so offended by this man that he goes to King Xerxes and he offers him a huge sum of money if he can destroy Mordecai and Mordecai's people. And the king, in typical fashion, says, okay, whatever, sounds okay to me. When word of this reaches Mordecai, he realizes that only one person can save Israel. Esther, the harem girl, the beauty queen. And so he sends word to Esther to gather her courage to go see the king and to do her best to try to save her people. Of course, Esther doesn't want to go, so she sends word back and says, hey, if I go to the king unsummoned and he doesn't extend the golden scepter, I'm as good as dead. And we both know that the king isn't too open to people defying him in public. Remember what happened to Vashti? And besides that, Mordecai, the king hasn't summoned me for 30 days. So think about this scenario. Xerxes and Esther are husband and wife, but she hasn't seen him for a month. He has a full harem. He's a playboy. He is not a devoted husband. It's apparent that the king is not as excited about Esther as he was in earlier days. So Esther's just saying to Mordecai, he's saying, hey, I'm not very interested, Mordecai, in going to see the king right now because of how things are between us. Now, many friends would just stop there and say, okay, I understand. You're right. It's far too risky. But not Mordecai. Mordecai challenges her, and in chapter 4 he says to her, do not think, Esther, that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And then these awesome words, and who knows? Who knows that you have come to royal position for such a time as this? Mordecai is saying, hey Esther, the fate of a whole nation, the fate of the people of God, the fate of God's dream to redeem the world in human terms, at least as far as we can see right now, it rests in your hands, Esther. And you've not been brought to this time in your life for the sake of accumulating an exquisite wardrobe and precious gems and exotic fragrances. You have not been brought to this point in your life to become the most desirable, attractive, applauded woman in the kingdom. You have not been brought to this point in your life for any of the reasons that the king thinks that you have. You have been brought to this point to work for justice and to spare a people a great suffering. You have been brought to this point to oppose a man who is vile and evil and supremely powerful. You have a mission, Esther, and your mission matters. You have been brought to this point in your life not for yourself at all, but to be part of God's plan to redeem the world. So Esther, do not let your success at filling society's shadow mission for women blind you to what God says your mission really is. Esther, live